am the CTO at Techolution. So today I want to talk some basics, some Cloud 101, if you will. I probably should have did this video first in my overall Tech Talk series, but hey, no time like the present, right? So let's get going here. Let's talk basics. So first, we got three main cloud options. There's actually a couple more, like container as a service, but we don't need to get into that right now. Let's talk to three basic different types. You probably hear this a lot. They are IaaS, PaaS, and SaaS. What that actually stands for is IaaS is infrastructure as a service. So these are what your cloud providers are currently doing today. Think of your Amazons of the world, all the different products, GCP, Azure, they all have these. These are your most basic building blocks. So these are things like EC2 instances or GCD instances. These are your pure compute. So if you're thinking data migration and moving workloads to the cloud, this is typically where most people start with. And this is more your lift and shift based model. So if you're going to take a VM that's running in your data center and you want to just dump it into the cloud and get it running, that's probably what you're going to do. It's really just giving you the infrastructure. You run it, you manage it. It's just a compute in the cloud. That's all it is. The next layer up is a PaaS. This is probably the most complicated of the three. A PaaS is, it's a platform as a service. So think of it as giving you the engine to run your applications. So you're still responsible for managing and building your own applications, but it's giving you the engine in which to do it. So the burden shifts a little bit more on you to manage that. But it's not as bad as the IaaS, I'll show you in a second here. But so it's somewhere in the middle. It's really where most of the industry is going, especially where you want control of your application and want some sort of devs and some sort of ownership. And then all the way to the right there is your SaaS. So this is software as a service. So think of things like, Jira and like GitHub, and like these are solutions that exist on the online, and they're essentially, multi-tenant. So multiple people, multiple companies are using the same application. You don't know or see their data, but it's a solution that exists in the cloud. You can consume it. You can be part of it. You get very little, control over it. They manage everything for you. It's really just a software solution that exists. You subscribe to it. You use it. And if you don't like what they're doing, too bad. You're stuck. You have to use what they have. So let's talk who manages what here. So, all the way on the left here, or at least my left, you have your on-premise. And this is where you run everything. So you're responsible for the network, you're responsible for the hardware, you're responsible for the application. You need somebody to go in there, set it up, build it out, run it, everything. Soup to nuts, right? The entire thing is yours. As we start to shift over to the right, you start to see a change in that. Who owns what and who is responsible for what. So at the infrastructure as a service, for instance, you're no longer managing the virtualization and the storage and the servers. All that hardware is provided for you. So you think of GCP, right? So they have some server farm somewhere, and actually in multiple places across the country and in the world, that is really just a big data center. And in the IaaS, they're just giving you a chunk of their servers, or a small little, maybe one rack, or like one system or a piece of a system inside of a rack, and you're getting you get that virtual space. So they're taking care of all the virtualization, all the storage, all the networking. Like you don't go there and change networking files; they do that for you. So, but you're still responsible for like the OS and the application, the data, the runtime. That all falls in your lap. So if you need to patch the operating system, for instance, that's your job. That's your responsibility. And you need to make sure you stay on top of that. Now, as you go even further to the right at platform as a service, all those systems and all those pieces start to fall off. You no longer have to manage the OS or the middleware or the runtime. You are only responsible for your application and the data. This is why this has become the most popular, because it shifts a lot of that burden of managing all that stuff that you don't really care about. That's a lot of overhead. It shifts it out of your hand and into somebody else's. Now, you give up a little bit of that control by doing that. So if you need to run on a specific version of a specific OS, then platform as service is probably not for you. And then as you shift all the way over to the right, to the software as a service, you control nothing. Everything is managed for you. You get to consume the application and use it as you want, but you really get no other control over that. Okay, so you got the basics. So now let's talk the basics components of the cloud. These are, a lot of the CSPs, cloud service providers out there have a whole slew of products. Probably do a whole video just in going through all of them. And you look at that catalog and you're probably just completely overwhelmed with what is in it. So let's focus on the 4 main ones that are probably, especially if you're just getting started looking at this, where you want to focus on. And they are storage, compute, network, and database. So storage is, just think of a hard drive, right? You have a hard drive, all your systems out there have hard drives. That's all storage is. It's just a hard drive on the internet and in the cloud. So if you need to write, files to a disk or store them somewhere, storage is what you want. And things like S3 or Google Storage, those are your systems what they're called in those world. Now compute is your operations, your running. These are the systems that do something. So in the cloud world, you always want to do something, right? That's the whole reason why you're there. So these is the brains and the power of the whole operation. So in compute, you have things like EC2, GCE. These are the different cloud components that fire and run workloads. Now, some of that PaaS may fall into there too, but that kind of blurs and muddies the water. Let's not get into that. Then you have your network. So how do your systems in the cloud communicate and connect? So that's your network component. That's your VLAN, your subnets, your VPCs, all that fun stuff that we do to interconnect and secure the different systems that are running on the cloud. And then finally, some level of database. So, most applications out there, need some form of either relational or NoSQL database out there. A lot of the cloud providers, I should say all the cloud providers, have some form of managed service. Or you can roll your own and run a database inside of a compute engine. But, these are essentially your building blocks of building out your cloud environment. So, everybody, or at least these days, seems like they want to get to the cloud. But you should know that, it's not a free lunch. It's not something that you can just pick up and do. So you should know some of the risks versus rewards of why you want to get there. So first, let's talk the good stuff. Let's talk the rewards. So first, get the scalability, right? So, that's the real reason why everyone wants to move away from your CapEx to your OpEx. So you don't want to go out, purchase servers, and think retail or think systems where you have large spikes and a large, meet and demand. If you were to go out and purchase for your biggest user base, your max load, you're probably going to be way overutilized in what you use on a day-to-day basis. So like the cloud is perfect for this. It lets you scale and operate when you need to and when you're, when you have to. So you get a big sale, got a promotion going on, or, just a big spike in demand. Cloud perfect for that. Geographic expansion. So think, unless you have the money that Google does or other big CSPs, and you want to create data centers around the world, have fun with that. That's going to cost a lot of money. So might as well leverage what's there. You want your application, your data, you want it to be closer to your end users to reduce the time it takes for those bytes and bits to get to them. It's, physics, right? The further you are away, the more time it's going to take. So might as well get your systems closer to them. Disaster recovery. Just think if you lost the whole data center or needed to shift loads, the cloud is perfect for that. They have, data centers around the world, which if it's built right, you can easily shift that over. Facilitating the developer innovation. So, in order to stay on top of it and not get beat out by the unicorns of the world, the cloud native builds, you need to do some innovation. And in order to facilitate that, you need to make sure that your developers can create these services on the fly, try them out, test them out, see if they make sure they understand it, and be able to roll them out. And this will give you a good competitive edge. So, and then finally, security. Whether you know this or not, the cloud is going to be more secure than any of your data centers. As long as you do it right and set it up right and handle all the best practices and follow everything you need to do to keep it secure, trust me, they spend a lot more money securing it than you ever will. But there are some, catch-me's and risks and, caveats here. First, you need to have a plan. Like, don't just go in there and start, firing your guns and setting up servers. You're going to hit problems, and you're going to be so dependent on it that it's going to be impossible to go back and fix it. There's so many times that even in some of our cloud environments, I'm like, why did we set this up this way? Why didn't we have a plan? We should have came in here and orchestrated and set it up right. And I've seen so many customers do that way. So have a plan going in, have a structured way, make sure you're doing it for the right reasons. So make sure you have the regulatory and the compliance issues set up. You could run into an issue where, maybe you are not allowed to export your data out. I know, countries in EMEA and Europe must have data residency laws and keep them in there. So, by just spinning up a cloud instance and throwing data on it, you may be breaking laws. There may be some latency to your data center. So, unless you're building it right from the cloud or right from the get-go, good chance is you probably have some form of legacy data center. And if you're not going to move everything all at once and do a big bang, which I really, please don't do that, you're going to have some legacy connections back to your old data center, and that is going to slow some things down. Be aware of cloud lock-in too. If you want to make the decision and go all in with some cloud vendor, that's probably financially the best way to go. But it will take some effort if you do need to move it out of that cloud system and into another system. And then a big one that I'm sure everyone knows is uncontrolled costs. So, if you're not monitoring and checking and making sure that someone is looking after it, you could end up spending more money than you would have if you just kept it in the data center. So, and then I always have security on there. Funny, I have it in both places, but security can be a big gotcha if you don't do it right. And that's why I think a lot of the misconceptions are out there about the cloud not necessarily being, the safest place in the world. So when you move to the cloud, and who manages it? When you have all these workloads, do you want to manage them themselves, or do you want the cloud to manage them themselves? So I talked about managed services that exist out there. Ultimately, you're going to have to make a decision. Do we want to manage services? Do we want to use managed services to the best of our ability, or do we want to go in and manage all the stuff ourselves? So just kind of real quick, some pros and cons on it. If you manage it yourself, what I mean by that is you basically set up a VM and you install whatever software on it. You have full control of it. You have no real restrictions on the workload. You can grow that out as big as you want. Some things may have or require admin rights on those, and that is a good use case for when you manage it yourself. There's almost no vendor lock-in either, besides the OS that you choose. I mean, you're creating your image and you're ultimately in control of everything, so you got full control over it. It does require, however, an operations team. It may be slower to set up. It takes more time and costs more. I mean, all the cloud vendors want you to roll your own because it uses more compute. I mean, it probably would have been, like I said, cheaper to run in the data center if you just did it that way from the start. From the CSP managed, so managed services, if you want to go that way, that's a great way to go too. Some of the pros there are, it's secure, it's unlimited data backups and storage. I mean, you're getting the best of the cloud you can possibly offer. So they're going to be making sure that the CSPs are managing the SLAs and keeping the systems up to date and running. And you're going to be your cheapest options. They're pay as you go. You use what you consume. You have no hardware or infrastructure expenses. You're just paying for the service and that's it. And they're really built for operational costs and high availability and disaster recovery because the CSPs are managing all this for you. But some of the cons, they're really limited in tech. So, if you have a specific requirement of like a specific version of a coding library, for instance, and that's not supported in a managed service, then you probably can't use it. So you're very limited to what you can do. And there's a really greater coupling with the CSPs. So, you go in, you bind and code all of your stuff to that managed service, you're stuck there. If you want to go to another cloud vendor, which may or may not be a problem, but you're going to have to recode and redo everything from scratch. So let's talk, I think I got, 4, maybe 3, I don't remember, we'll see. Strategies on what I see a lot of people going to and doing to get to the cloud, right? So first one I call SaaS first. So, this is probably more accurate for, smaller companies, and, they're looking to just consume as much software from the cloud as they possibly can. They don't have big development teams. They, really smaller, footprints for IT staff, and it's really good for getting going and getting going quickly. You're gonna forego though some of the customizations and specific needs. So if you need specific functionality, remember, you get it, it's there, use it. You can customize it maybe a little, depending on which it is, but don't expect to, do full-on customizations for it. I always like to throw a gotcha in there too, some things that people don't necessarily think about. And one of the things that I found with SaaSes is as your organization grows and you have more SaaSes, it's very difficult to manage all of your users across all the SaaSes. So think about a user in your company leaving, right? So now you're gonna have to go into every SaaS platform they're in and remove that user. So it becomes a challenge on the management side. Second one, lift and shift. So this is really, as I said, spinning up VMs, moving workloads as is, and not really going into the problem of fixing them, cleaning up, getting them ready for the cloud. It's probably going to get you out of the data center really quickly though, because you don't really have to modify anything. You can just pick it, lift it, and drop it in. Good for big organizations, have big data center footprints, and some that need some of the scalability over the existing data center. And it's usually a good starter point for getting companies to the cloud. It's probably one people have heard of the most. The biggest drawback is definitely you're going to be a cost. It's going to be more expensive to run it in the cloud this way. I mean, you probably would have been cheaper if you just bought your own hardware and did it that way if you're going to run that way for the long way. The gotcha, it's really not a long-term play. I mean, it's a good place to start with and get to the cloud, but if that's where your cloud journey ends, you're probably going to end up paying for it. So make sure that you're just using it as a temporary spot. Next one is improve and move. So this is really understanding that going directly to cloud could be expensive. So you might not want to do that. You might want to try to optimize some stuff first before you do it. So it's good for organizations that are a little bit more cost sensitive on the operations side and the management side, and probably have a little bit of experience into application development and know how to work and change things to better work with the cloud and have a good insight there. The biggest drawback is going to be figuring it out. It's going to be specific to your application. So it's going to be hard to, do a general information about this. Your developers will know a lot more about this, but it's not as simple as a lift and shift. And then the biggest gotcha is it's definitely time consuming and it will delay your overall journey to the cloud. Now see, I do have one more. So modernize in place. So this is my probably favorite one. I'm a big Anthos guy and I like to create the systems in place here. So basically what this is for is essentially creating your application future state stack, but doing it in your data center. So, or wherever system you're at. So creating a new system where everything exists the way you want it to, getting everything the way you want it to before you move it to the cloud. And then, it's really good for organizations that have a big data center footprint, a lot of legacy systems, a lot of technical debt, don't really know how to get started. It allows you to set up and migrate things slowly. You can, modernize in your current environment, upgrade them to the standards, and then when you're ready, shift them to the cloud. The biggest drawback is that the technologies are still emerging. There's usually additional, subscriptions and licenses, and that overhead can be somewhat expensive. The biggest gotcha is the operational overhead is pretty much overlooked, right? So how do you keep these systems up and running and all these different moving parts? It could tend to be a lot. So I hope you learned a lot. This was actually one of my more entertaining videos, I hope. I want to thank you, and hopefully you'll stick around for our next video. Take care.